All right, and welcome to the Wicked Queer Talkback with our director I'm going to try to pronounce it in my English,
You go ahead.
Neubau,
Neubau.
Neubau.
Yes.
Welcome, Johannes, and so happy that you could join us for a little Q&A today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me. It's wonderful.
I know that I certainly miss, sitting in the auditorium and allowing that energy from the audience to be a part of this. So we're
Sure.
still navigating the virtual landscape and trying out different things. So again, happy that you're a part of this pre-recording for
Yes.
today's session.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to jump right in because, one, I very much enjoyed the movie and your visual storytelling technique. But my first question for you as the director of this film
Mm.
is which came first? Was it the story that inspired you as a director, or
Mm.
as a person, did this story come to you
Mm.
and
Mm.
inspire you?
Yeah. I mean, like the genesis of this project, it sort of can't be told without mentioning the collaboration with Tuki Royal, who is playing the main part and who wrote the script.
Okay.
and and we've been collaborating for up until that movie. We had been collaborating for about 5 or 6 years in various forms. And actually, our as an origin, we're both theater makers, so this is our first movie. But we have been doing other things. For instance, I've been part of Turkey's boy band and whatever. Like it's it's various collaborations that we had been having so far. And when it's maybe it's interesting for audiences to know that there was not an intention to make a movie in the first place. Like there was more of a starting question, coming from spending time together in that very region where the movie is shot. Like because we felt we felt a strong, how to say, I will search sometimes for words now. It would come easy in German press release text, but I'll have to look for this. No, but like we felt a strong divide between countryside and urban spaces. And we were trying to look into ways on how to bridge that somehow, or how to create an interaction between those spaces. And when we were in that region, there were, like I said, there was no idea to make a movie. But then we understood that that's the only medium by which we're going to transport that landscape, or that specific vibe, the specific atmosphere, how we're going to transport it into the cities.
Well,
So
and you did capture that vibe as you describe it, because in watching the film, there were moments that I forgot that it was a fictional piece because it almost reads more like docudrama, meaning,
mm,
again, the inclusion of the landscape as such a character in this
mm,
film, and the tension between, which is unanswered, between the city and the rural life.
mm. Yeah. And it's a double transaction, because these people you see in the movie that sort of represent the city, those kind of demons that are haunting Marcus, all those scenes were shot on the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riot. So
Oh,
we actually, like, we're filming a performance we did to some extent. So it's a performance documentation, if you want. Our first day of shooting was where we brought people from the city out to that very countryside to celebrate, because somehow we wanted to get past that notion that, okay, Stonewall, it is New York, we know it, but somehow we wanted to celebrate it in a very unlikely space. And that was the countryside, simply. Yeah.
so tell me a bit about the actor who played Marcus, because he was also involved in the writing of this. Your relationship sort of is sort of the foundation for this, and you mentioned that you're both theater practitioners, which I'm a fan of as a theater guy myself. Um,
That's nice.
but
Yeah.
that your relationship, I guess the reason I ask is because um, the character of Marcus is uh, so honest, meaning, again,
Mm.
that sort of I kept getting in my head that this was a documentary, not so much a
Mm.
fiction piece.
Yeah.
So that to realize that he was part of the writing,
Mm.
because a very natural performance. It doesn't
Yeah,
feel
absolutely.
put on. It doesn't feel
No.
like, oh, gee, I've never, put food in this trough to feed farm
No,
animals
no.
before. It was
Yeah,
really
yeah.
natural.
No, it really like, and that, I mean, that was one of the aesthetical ambitions, to somehow make it look that he's really embedded, like really, like to really embed him into daily routines. Basically, that was an aesthetical grip we had, and you wouldn't believe how many things have been learned very short term before 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 the movie was shot. For instance, Tuki, the main actor and scriptwriter, he wrote the script, and then as it was sort of, as the first draft was out, he realized, oh, I need a driver's license to play that part. So so what he did, like in May, we shot in June, in May he got his driver's license. So there was a lot of stuff in there that was actually sort of like really straight out of the, I don't know if you can say that, but warm from the oven, and at the same time, our ambition was to make it really look like a long-term embeddedness of the main character. And I think what the reason why it worked, given that it is so short term, the reason why it worked is that we both share a certain countryside upbringing experience. That's
Okay.
sort of what we can rely on, like, and that was our meeting point also for this project, like to somehow, okay, what if we relived our coming of age story, but this time with internet. what if what
Right.
if we were on the countryside, and we actually, we would have sort of access to imagery that we were longing for back then, and couldn't really, or like we had to zap through private channels late at night to get a glimpse of, you know what I'm talking about, to
A
get a glimpse of,
hint of,
yeah, a hinge of a world that we were looking for. And so we created this construction with this main character actually being absolutely connected, which makes it more complicated, whether this classical gay narrative of like small town boy leaving the little shit town, go into the city, that narrative is somehow complicated through the, how to say it, like through the availability of this world somehow. And it gets extra, it sort of gets extra, put put on its tip when you think that this region is really only an hour's drive from Berlin. So it is like even 45 minutes. And people in Germany that consume the movie will know that he's sort of like so close, and still
well,
he seems to have never been there.
in that rural environment, it doesn't take far to get out of the city sometimes.
That's
Not every
that's
city
very
is New
true.
York that goes on and on and on and
Yeah.
on. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned that you hadn't made a movie before.
Mm.
So how long was this in production?
Yeah, that's a bit the crazy story about it, and maybe the story that will make professional filmmakers really envious, because I get it. Like, and basically, I mean, it was from the idea to the to the to the app to the festival we showed it to, and the festival that was shown it first, where we won the main prize, was it was 1.5 years. So it's really ridiculous, like in terms of like how fast this went. And now, understanding the logics of the movie industry, I understand how lucky we got, like, and how many things came together and aligned themselves in a very lucky constellation. And yeah, and I will say that, like, being a sort of coming from the side into movie making, we were so lucky to surround ourselves with a production company, Schurdenberg Films, that provided sort of like they provided the safety net of professionalism around this. So they made sure that the head of the departments were people that could actually have a strong opinion about things. And I somehow, like, that changed my position as a director also, in a way that I enjoyed it, because I was sort of coming as a person with questions. I think that created for very good collaborations with the head of department for camera, sound editing. I was always coming with like, okay, how do we do this? I know what I want. I know what I know what I know the sound of it, I know the smell of it, I know the atmosphere, but how do we get there now? And yeah, that was, I mean, I think ultimately that is the director's position, but I sort of had no expertise to run somebody over with. I really had to, like, it was always dialogical. It had to be. Mm.
Well, and that feel again, that vibe really runs through this. You
Mm.
mentioned how it's sort of a new take on the country boy goes to the big city or
Mm.
desires to go to the big city. And what
Mm.
I loved is that there was no great speech. There wasn't like some monologue of like, oh, I'm out of the country. It was all in between what you heard people say. It's like
Mm.
all the unspoken things.
Mm.
This is where
Mm.
I say the ability for you to tell the story through the visual narrative
Mm.
was
Mm.
really remarkable because
Thank you.
um, if I think about it, the script wasn't dense with speaking. Um,
No, and but that's also things that sort of like came during while shooting. We understood that it has another temperature, and then also in the editing room we understood that. I think the scenes where there is dialogue, they're very precise and they're very like they show sort of the quality of dialogue writing that Tukey applies. Like that's no doubt.
yes,
But it got clear that this will be somehow based on the silence and loneliness that you experience out there somehow, like
it's
the
profound.
the monastic life. You don't speak so much in this in this monastery
It
called the
might be a
countryside.
monastic life, but you had two very sexy scenes in there. Certainly
Mm,
the opening, and then even the scene when Marcus, goes behind the hay bale to jerk
yeah,
off. It
yeah,
was very sexy. So
yeah. I'm
sexy
really
monastic
I'm
lifestyle.
really proud of these. I mean, but I'm especially proud of the way Tuki and Daniel, who were the actors in the first scene,
Uh-huh.
how they found the technique, because that was, again, that was more classical theater devising from my end. Like that was like, okay, this is where it's going, but then they took complete charge of, they could took complete responsibility of sort of finding consensual modes of acting sex, let's say.
Right. The
um,
choreography, the
yeah,
placement of the bodies.
yeah, but it was interesting because like what I know from theater also, and sort of like intimacy coordinators jobs is like, okay, sex scenes, that's like stunts, like you want to define everything, like you want to be
Right.
very clear. But they didn't, like they found a way to rehearse this where it could still be an improvisation, and I think that's the quality of that first scene for sure.
Oh, so sexy. Yeah.
Yeah, like
Great
I was in awe. Like I was sitting, because we made sure during the shoot, of course, that there would be sort of like as few people in the space as possible. And I was sitting in another room with my little monitor, and I could see what was going on there, and I was like, this is our opening. And I mean, it has always been, that was always the idea, to start the movie with some kind of, I think, my visual, or for me, Bruce LeBruce, and sort of like these kind of post-porn moves have been very influential for me. So I was into finding another, sex not as a driving, sex not in a narrative way. I felt there can be space for, when you start the movie, there can be space where you feel this is too long. Like, like I mean, in the first edits, it was even much longer than I think some people talked me out of it, saying like, okay, but at some point the movie has to start. But I was interested in a sort of post-porn start, like really like mix up the, like don't live up to that expectation of a sort of countryside or whatever, like coziness, because I think that's the important thing. Like you have to, like you sort of set the bar with that scene, and then you understand, okay, now I'll focus on what the human conflicts are, but there's no hiding, or there's sort of like no leaving that out. You can sometimes, I can feel like, there is a need to be somehow, in gay cinema, there might be a need to say, we also have existential conflicts, like make it universal somehow. And I think that scene is the perfect opening into universality, because it's sort of like saying, okay, this is what's up. This is the sex life. And now, and then the grandmother calls, and
Well, see,
then,
and that's it right there, where
yeah.
again, this vibe is so authentic because you're
Mm,
having a good romp, but when
mm.
you see grandmother calling, you got to take that call. That's
Yeah, shit, there's nothing that's going to stop you from that. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah.
everyone in the room knows that.
Everyone understands. Yeah, the audience and the sex partner will understand. That's what's up. Yeah.
Well,
Mm.
and certainly Marcus's grandmother and granny, Alma
Mm.
and Sabine,
Mm.
and the caretaking of seniors. A
Mm.
really interesting part of the story and how it ties again to um, our relationships to traditions or family or
Mm. Mm.
literally the land, the landscape.
Yeah.
Um, was this taking care of our elders a part of the story from the beginning? Something that
Yeah.
you or your
Yeah.
colleagues are experiencing in real life?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to some extent, we are like both Tuki and I. We were at that point dealing with our demented grandmothers, um, who then passed away both during the process, actually, and sort of made moves in heaven for us to get the movie out, I believe. But but yeah, I will be honest about it. That was at a distance. Like, that was sort of like the main responsibility was with sort of our parents taking care of our grandparents. So none of us is in that life situation. That is a construction. I think that is just sort of like a um, hypothesis around, like, okay, what would it mean if we took care in our community to the most radical extent somehow, like where it also really involves sacrifice. I think that's the important thing with Marcus, is that you can feel that. I mean, it's very ambivalent. He's not unhappy where he is, and they're good for him, but it's also sacrifice.
It does give weight to his decision to be in the country. It's
Yeah.
not lack of funds or distance, but it's
No,
really the responsibility that he feels towards his grandmother and his granny. And
exactly.
certainly it resonated with me, my age, taking care of my parents. And
Sure.
I wonder sometimes things have changed, but uh, often, not always,
Mm.
but often gay folks might not have children. They might not
Mm.
have the same types of responsibilities when
Mm.
people start having families.
Mm.
So we,
I think,
us, we can
yeah.
be the crowd that becomes the caretaker.
Exactly. And I mean, and that's sort of a horrible political assumption, to think that the gay caretaker will be free off on Christmas Eve, like, that kind. But you hear that sometimes. But
Yeah.
I mean, with Marcus, I think it is to some extent, or I shape it from a notion of parenting also, that he is parenting this grandmother of his, like, because she's like a child. I mean, she's funny and very annoying.
Yes.
you know so you take the full hit, you do the 24/7 sort of presence, and sometimes you get rewarded by an outrageously funny comment, but most of the time it's hard work also, like the responsibility of it, that she doesn't understand, of course, about. She doesn't understand that about herself, that just like a child could be asking you, was it hard for you when I wasn't around? Like,
I was
when
mostly
I wasn't
concerned
born
with
yet, that must
seeing
have been
her.
tough for you.
There was a shot at one point where she's in through the window out in the garden eating things off the tree.
Yeah,
That concerned me. Although the characters on the forefront were just like, oh, okay.
she's happy. She's
All right. I was like, what is she eating? Oh dear.
exactly.
The
Yeah, that
mounting.
yeah, that's very much where I take it from. But I mean, I guess we've been thinking about ways of, like, we've been very busy with commitment and ideas of community, and like how does caretaking work within communities, like that's sort of like what has really been interested. We wanted to model, we wanted to create a model somehow, a narrative model of how it could be. We're not saying that this is what we're living. I mean, like in terms of Tuki and me, I'm living on the countryside. Actually, he's living in the city, so it's not like this is our lives. But there is, we have entrance points into this narrative from our lives for sure.
Again, without knowing the specifics, that that vibe, as we've talked about, that
Mm,
authenticity really reads through this.
thank,
I don't want to overlook the wonderful actor who played Duke
yeah, yeah,
in the film, and sort of the relationship that comes forth for Marcus and Duke by placing the hairband on the mirror of
yeah,
Marcus's dead battery car.
yes, exactly,
That such a little gesture that
yeah,
was so profound. I loved it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm also enjoying the applicability of that thing when he pours it over, like when he puts it over his wrist. Like, yeah, there's a lot in there that he can. He even tries to smell on it, getting
Oh
something
yes,
over his hair. Like,
before they duck behind the trucks, there's
exactly.
that moment where he
Yeah,
sniffs it, and
yeah,
even
yeah.
though I can't smell it, it was such a thing that it was so private. It's like I had to look around, like there was someone else in the room.
Ah, now I start to regret again that you weren't watching it with other people. That because that's the kind of shame moment is sort of what you want in cinema. Like,
Yes,
oh,
well,
am I really watching Raspberry Reich with 500 people here? Is that what's
oh,
going
well, this
on?
is it. This is
Yeah,
where the reaction from the other audience members is going to either heighten or diffuse our own reaction.
for
Again,
sure.
as a theater guy, the
Yeah,
need
yeah,
for the players and the audience to be together is
yeah. We're so familiar with that, or like, but I mean, we were lucky because we were showing at a festival in January 2020, and so that was before everything locked down here in Europe, and so we got to experience the movie with audiences, and for like I went into, not out of pure narcissism, but I went to see sort of like, I think 4 or 5 screenings of it, and that was just really to find that space of resonance that I know from theater. Like, how does the movie react today? Like, like, because there's a difference. All of a sudden, you have a screening where there are subtitles. That makes another level of relaxation or
right.
whatever. Like it's so it was really, for me, it was so interesting to apply that theater perspective to the actual performances, if you want, like when it happened. Like, how does that interact?
Yeah, well, we're all trying to figure that out, and adapting as we go. I mean, this is the
Mm,
time of great experimentation.
for sure.
Festivals online that lots of people can see and visit,
Yeah,
versus the coming together of people, which
for
I
sure.
am looking forward to, but
Yeah,
kind of patiently waiting. Um,
yeah, yeah,
a question about the actor who played Duck.
yeah. Sorry.
Was this by audition? Was he someone that you knew based on your work in the theater?
Yeah, no, that's we did an audition also, but the main suggestion came from our sort of from the person that did the casting, Andrieux,
Okay,
who is somehow, or who is very embedded in this German Vietnamese community, and like when, well, or like maybe it's more general about the way we casted or with the way we wrote. These two things went very much together. So when it got clear, okay, it's this very story, then Tuki reworked the whole script again and really base it on, okay, what are the specifics of these stories? Because like the for instance, the exciting thing with the German Vietnamese story is that there is one in East Germany as well as in West Germany. It's just sort of like, um, it's different. It's different stories. One is political refugees, and the other one is people that were hired into the socialist part of Germany to come as workers. And now these people somehow, like, or sort of, it gets very specific. Like I can't even lay it out in all dimensions now. But then all of a sudden, that conversation they have at the at the lake is quite interesting, because then it turns out that that this Duke character came to East Germany after the fall of the wall, which indicates clearly where does he come from Vietnam. So so yeah, so it's just a it's a very specific, or that casting decision created specific dialogues again, and that's how we went about everything, like also with, I don't even know if that can be recognized at first sight, but as it is a Jewish family that Marcus is based in, we also worked with the two women are also secular and religious Jewish women. So I won't say who's what, or maybe that's not interesting, but it's just to say that also that was very much about checking in. Okay, now we want to use sort of a Jewish narrative here, a German Jewish narrative. Are you fine with that? Like, does that work for you? Like, how much do you want of that? So we were, while script writing, we were very flexible, adapting to how these characters could be told. Like,
Well, and it's interesting to note because certainly those kind of nuances, they went over
yeah,
my
yeah, for
head.
sure, for sure. And,
And mostly I think about how we're being introduced to bodies without a narrative, just
mm,
bodies.
mm,
And when we first meet Duke and he's in the water, and when he stands up, and again, it was just, to me, it was super interesting because
mm,
we're looking at both Marcus's body and Duke's
mm,
body throughout, and
sure.
always in sort of this, I don't know, it was uh, again super sexy, super
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure,
appealing, but
for
again
sure.
without a polemic narrative, just
No.
present, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and that's also, that's the level on which the film is supposed to work. Like, I think the eroticism of it should sort of like the eroticism of either being in nature or being with someone else should always sort of like, that was the foundation of it
Yeah.
all. That's also why this masturbation scene in the field, it's really, it's a, I don't know if that gets through, but it's supposed to be a happy evening. You know, it's not a it's not it's part of loneliness for sure, but it's a good night. He gets drunk and jerks off at the, I don't know what you call that in English, that thing he's leaning
To
on.
that hay bale or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hay bale. So it's just that was important for us to somehow create this notion of a somehow contained, satisfied existence with oneself still. Like,
Well,
no.
and that's what makes the ending, which I adored,
Mm,
so great, uh,
mm,
because it's inconclusive as to what the next step might be.
yeah.
We have two characters that don't seem to want the same thing,
Exactly.
and so it's the beginning of a, part two.
Mm,
But like a short story, I love an
mm,
ending like that, that that breaks open my mind without any
mm.
neatness, without any wrapping it up and tying it in a
Yeah,
bow.
yeah. I mean, I think there were also in the script there was a version of where it was going to go, but then with sort of feedback from producer and editor, we felt like this is the right way. Like, this is the way, because yeah, I mean, but now I also do have a lot of fantasies about what these two are doing. So I sort of, in my mind, I'm letting go of what I know from a previous ending, and I'm really thinking, okay, what is this going to be like? How are they going to solve this? Because these are very different needs, and basically now it very much depends on how strong, because they are in this one place where Duke is happy, and now it will very much depend on what Marcus decides for himself. Like, what how huge is that driving force of wanting to somehow live your life? Maybe he is already living his life. He just has to understand that, you know.
Well, and there's a, actually, I wrote something, a quote down from your movie. I
Mm,
really liked it. I believe Marcus says it, but it sort of hits with the ending of this movie. I can't be anywhere else right now.
mm,
And
yeah.
it speaks to that, again, being present.
Mm,
uh, it it might hint at longing, but again, a real understanding that this moment, this place is where I need to be.
Yeah, yeah,
It sort of stuck with me at the end of the movie because he's also the one that's like, oh, let's go to Berlin.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, I don't know, like a lot of or other movies that were made in 2019 have might have been charged with meaning even more with the pandemic now. But one thing that I can see here is, like, as we've all been atomized and lost mobility, I wonder, like, if there is something in the movie about immobility as a I don't know, like as a possibility, or like as like what if the promise of mobility was an empty promise to some extent. Like for instance, if you look at Marcus's father, he's only coming in through that letter, but he obviously, when after the fall of the wall, he felt that sense of freedom, and
Right.
he ran away, or he disappeared into the west, and the mother doesn't know where that west is and doesn't even know where to address the letter. That's why it's still there. um, but so somebody followed the mobility, and there's a East German singer-songwriter. He died in '95 already, but he would call it the mobility lie. So he lost his friends to '89, basically, because they would just go where there would be whatever more money to make or whatever. So that kind of uh, sense of having been abandoned, I think that comes in with the mother also. And yeah, so I think Marcus has that heritage, or that sort of pounding question of, like, okay, what is mobility really like, or am I going to do the same thing as my father did now, and
Right.
and and try to find or use all my freedom to the fullest, and where is that going to have me end up? Like, I think
Right.
that's the thing that sort of screws him over when he finds that letter. Like, I think that's sort of like, because I never actually, now when I talk about it with you, I only understand why that montage of the of the letter and the final scene, because obviously with him pushing for leaving, he's somehow reenacting something that his father did at some point, and where he knows that had some tough consequences. Like, he knows what it means from thinking of his mother being pregnant with him
Yeah.
at that point. Yeah.
So to again, so enjoyed the film, and I hope that people who are watching this have watched the film, and we're sort of unpacking it as opposed to doing any, um, giving away anything.
Mhm.
But thinking about this movie is done. You hadn't made a movie before. What's upcoming, Johannes? What do you
Aha.
have coming up?
Yeah. I mean, I'm it's funny because like I'm very lucky in this crisis. I have a fixed job as an artist. It's ridiculous, but we have this in Europe we have what is called an artistic PhD. So artists are allowed to go back to university, get paid for doing their art. It's a sort of third cycle thing, and that's a very strange situation I find myself in. I haven't been in that situation for 15 years, which means I'm not freelancing at the moment. I'm actually hired in a place to do my research, my artistic research. So I'm under the pandemic conditions. I'm very lucky to be so safe, and I will be busy with that for another 4 years. It's
Wow.
it's it's a research, to put it very briefly, but I'm looking into modes of consent between actors and directors, like what, or like modalities of consent, if you want. So this is what I'm finding out through practical and theoretical investigation. But yeah, but in the meantime, I got a bit interested in movie making, I have to say. Like, it's yeah, it's something that I want to revisit. Like, one time is no time, if you want. Like, if you did it once, it was so overwhelming that I'd like to revisit the experience of it. And so I'm at the moment I'm sort of starting off various projects, that I hope will materialize at some point. Like, I guess you never know with movies, but I'm sort of like developing.
But it's interesting because it is a form of storytelling, and
Mm,
you have been able to achieve with this movie, again, as I've been saying from the start, this sort of honest moment.
mm,
Sometimes movies, because they are static, it's not the
mm,
theater, which is ever changing every
mm,
show, but something that gets put together, and that's
mm.
what it is. And
That's
yet it
what it is.
reads again of
Mm,
the moment. It doesn't
mm.
seem archival, it doesn't seem
No,
far in the past.
no.
But I'm glad that you're still thinking along the lines of storyboards and technology,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thinking about storytelling in that manner.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I, something that I would really like to explore is sort of like how do we show people in like how do we make a situation interesting enough so we don't need a superficial conflict in it. I think that's sort of like what Neubau is trying to achieve. We see something, and in the best of all worlds, we're hooked to the main character and to his situation or her situation, if I'm going to be more general. But it's sort of like it doesn't need it also doesn't need victimization, like if you speak about um LGBTQ identities, like one movie that of course really stuck with me. I saw it in the early 2000s, I guess. It was Boys Don't Cry.
Yeah.
And we were of course for a second we were considering, okay, what happens if Marcus meets sorry, I don't know the good words in English, but let's say I'm just going to call it a roughneck environment. Like of course you expect that on the countryside, and Boys Don't Cry is sort of the precedent of a story that ends in a murder. And then it was very clear to us that we don't want to go there. We don't want to re-traumatize ourselves or our audience on that level. And so but that came to a certain price. That came to actually emptying that countryside from the people that live there, if you want. I mean, that's paradoxical, but
Here.
I'm not saying that Marcus and his grandmothers don't live there. We know it for a fact, and we have worked closely together with LGBT communities and organizations in that region to be sure that kind of life exists. But it's definitely in terms of majority minority, it is a minority. And why to sort of like cut out the majority? That was intentional. We had to do that in order to not produce that kind of friction.
Well,
So
it's fully appreciated.
mm,
Having, I have to admit, having lived through the news and the murder,
mm.
I actually have never seen the movie, because
Oh, Boys Don't Cry. Yeah, yeah. But
I,
you
I
you you
I
were
don't
aware of
need
the
a
case back
fictionalized
then.
version of this
Mhm.
horrible story that I
Yeah,
was quite aware of.
yeah,
Um, and so I appreciate not wanting to contribute to community trauma.
no.
And that's not to erase it, that is not to gatekeep it, but just to
Yeah,
expand on our stories. And
I think that's the like for me from a storytelling or directing perspective, that's really like how do you find that line that you show our lives in their precariousness without doing that sort of re-traumatizing act. But like there is sort of that thin line you have to walk where you don't end up telling a fairy tale about our lives, but at
also
the
true.
yeah, so it's really like, and I think if I go back to Neubau, I think it's very obvious also that there is a certain social pressure, like there's a struggle for Marcus in terms of being misgendered or sort of getting pressure from the job agency, like so it's not like we're not taking that out of the equation. We're just not working with the spectacular aspects of it, let's say. Hmm.
It's like I said, it creates a balance, which is super important, but is also still provocative, which is really the wicked queer way.
Good. That's a context.
Yeah. Wicked queer is a provocative crowd, and
Mm,
as LGBTQ becomes more mainstream,
mm,
our desire to find voices and ideas and stories that are on the edges of our lives becomes
Mhm.
more important. Um,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's interesting, like how do you do that? Like how do you do this sort of attempt of creating it as a safe environment and at the same time an edgy one? Like I think that's unsolved, like, or that's unresolved so far. I can see people searching in all directions, but it's obviously that a certain paradigm has come to an end, like a sort of, I wouldn't see how, I've been talking about Raspberry Reich, like the German terrorist porn. Like that was done in a specific time. Like it's not only the pornographic aspect. Also, nobody really speaks about the German terrorist movement at the moment anymore, because they're having quite some issues with machoism and sort of, they're really rough. Like, so all these things are coming to their end, and I'm really interested in how to finding that balance between edginess and safety somehow, like.
well, and I think that's why with the features and the shorts, there's more than 100 movies in the Wicked
Mm.
Queer Film Festival
Wow.
exploring that very idea.
Nice.
How to keep on edge, to not, contribute to harm, but to
Mm.
expose certainly
Mm.
systems that are not working for us, and
Mm.
perhaps even lead us into a brighter, lighter, fresher horizon.
Nice.
Typically ending on a high note.
Very good.
Well, so appreciative to have you in the room today, Johannes. Is there anything that you'd like the Wicked Queer audience to know before we close out this interview? I want to give you the final word.
Thank you so much. I mean, like, I certainly hope we haven't retold the whole movie. I certainly hope you got interested, and you got curious about what it is. Um, yeah, maybe I should just say the final thing. The German subtitle, or the reason why it's not translated. Maybe that would be interesting to know, like, or like what Neubau means. Like Neubau means new construction and or new building, and the place that Marcus lives in was in the 1970s 80s in East Germany, the new building. So that's sort of like what that means, but we chose to not translate it because we believe there's also a band, I don't know, Einstürzen Neubauten, like there are some German bands that just sort of come through with this weird, as a fetish object
Uh,
or as an object of fetishization, let's say. So yeah, that's maybe just to give yet another entrance. It's a movie about a new construction, and yeah. Otherwise, I just really wish everyone a great slow entertainment. Like that's
well,
what I
I
would.
think that's a great way to wrap up, because if we can activate this moment of speculation and change to be one of
Mm,
new construction, look at
mm,
that.
perfect.
All ties up together. Well, I couldn't help but want to put a bow on it.
You go ahead with it.
Thank you so much, Johannes,
Yeah.
for being a part of this today. And
Thank you.
tell all
That's
your
great.
friends about the film. And for people who are watching, there are 109 other movies happening. So go watch queer films. And thank you all very much.
Thank you. Bye bye, Wicked.